I want to thank you all for joining us today. I am here, Senate Majority Leader Erin Murphy.
I am Senator Lindsay Port, represent District 55 in the South Metro.
We want to announce that we're forming a select committee to dig into the federal impact on Minnesotans' economic stability based on the passage of the Federal Reconciliation Act, what Congress likes to call the Big Beautiful Bill. We think it is really important for us as policymakers to understand what is in that proposal and what it means for Minnesotans going forward. I don't know that there's ever been a committee like this formed in the Minnesota legislature, but I can't recall a time when we were working with the Congress that was so unwilling to partner with us and instead put into law things that for the next decade or so will cause real damage to Minnesota families, to their economic stability, and to many of the systems that we count on here in Minnesota: healthcare, food support, jobs, energy, etc. And so in order to understand what has been put into law by the Republican trifecta along with Donald Trump is to make sure that we are spending time reviewing and understanding what's there, but more importantly, talking with the people of Minnesota about the impacts that we see and what they're going to experience, so that we're able not just to prepare for the next session, but for the budget years ahead. Already, this administration has cut all sorts of sources of funding to the state of Minnesota, to local governments, to the University of Minnesota. The random and chaotic decision-making around the economy that the Trump administration is doing with things like tariffs are impacting the ag economy and their access to markets. The executive orders that we have seen put into place are creating not just chaos for people, but a real impact on our lives right here in the state of Minnesota. And the budget that they passed, the Reconciliation Act, is going to serve to eliminate coverage for more than 140,000 Minnesotans over the next 4 years. Could have an impact of more than $1 billion on our state's budget. We'll lose SNAP funding that could total $135 million annually. 45,000 Minnesotans could lose access to food support. We think it's important for us to understand from a budget perspective what the Congress has done, but more importantly, we need to prepare and help Minnesotans prepare for what could be a hard economic hit and a lack of stability, not just in the things that we prepare for people, we do for people through a government that serves the people, but also in their ability to support themselves and their families across the state of Minnesota.
When we think about this select committee, we will certainly be having hearings here at the Capitol. A few months ago or a month and a half ago, after the bill was signed in Congress, MMB put together a presentation for legislators that showed us what that impact means for Minnesota, just a first look, sort of top line idea of the impacts that it will have on Minnesota. And we think it's important to share that with Minnesotans. And so in our first hearing, we'll do sort of an overview from MMB at the state level, impacts, but also hear from cities and counties and school boards, hear from the Attorney General on the various injunctions that he is working on, so that we can get sort of a top-line picture. But after that, we want to go out to the communities across the state of Minnesota. We want to hear from farmers about the insurance premiums that are going up on the individual market, we expect by large numbers. We want to hear from cities and counties. We want to hear from hospitals that are at risk of closing to really understand what these impacts are for Minnesotans' lives. So every other week through the next several months, we'll be alternating between hearings here at the Capitol and site visits to Minnesota, where we hear from, Minnesotans about how how the tariffs, how the tax changes, how the executive orders, how the frozen grants are all impacting lives already here in Minnesota, and what is to come for planning. The state has to look out multiple years as we plan our budgets. So do cities and counties and school boards, and they're already trying to do that. And I think one of the biggest things that we're hoping to understand by visiting communities across the state is, what don't we know? There have been, a lot of mandates passed in the reconciliation bill, but not a lot of guidance given. And many of the federal agencies have had thousands of people fired from them who would normally be our contacts. So there isn't guidance being given from the federal government. We need to understand what those unanswered questions are so that we can help to try to provide some stability moving forward and work in partnership with the cities, the counties, the school boards, with our farmers and teachers and nurses. The federal government may have given up on partnering with us, but we're not giving up on partnering with Minnesotans.
We think it's really important to take what we are experiencing and what Minnesotans are experiencing as chaos and turn that into some sort of clarity, not just for policymakers, but for Minnesotans on the horizon ahead. We have put together a very serious committee, serious people to take on this challenge. I just want to make sure I name them all properly for you. Senator Port will serve as the chair of the Select Committee. Senator Kupek will be the vice chair. Senator Carla Nelson will serve as the lead for the Republicans. In addition to that, we'll have Senator Mann, Dr. Mann, Senator McQuaid, and Senator Dibble, Senator Jordan Rasmussen, Senator Curran, Senator Utke from the Health and Human Services Committee. I've added Senator Rust and Senator Marty, the chairs of Taxes and Finance, as ex officio members, and I'm really grateful that Senator Hoffman will also serve as an ex officio member, bringing his expertise on this really important issue for people who are aging, people with disabilities. It is a serious committee. I've worked with Leader Johnson. He submitted the names of, I think, people with great integrity from their caucus, because we understand that we're going to have work to do in our future. One last facet of this legislation that I think was no longer legislation, this law. It creates a lot of federal debt, $3.4 trillion in federal debt. More importantly, it provides significant tax cuts to people. $1 trillion of tax cuts go to the 1% richest people in this country. That $1 trillion could pay for Medicaid and SNAP for Minnesotans for a decade. That's a lot of money that is going into the pockets of the various wealthy people in this country, and the people who are going to pay the price are Minnesota families. I don't really understand how the Congress could have taken this action. I don't understand how our Republican members of Congress have taken this action. It feels like they put Minnesotans in the state's budget in a boat. They punched some holes in the bottom of the boat, and they've set us off to figure it out on our own. And we're going to take that charge very seriously, see where we can plug holes, and make sure that we can continue to build a future for the people of Minnesota despite their action.
Time for questions on the Select Committee?
How does Leader Johnson feel about this?
We talked about it briefly, and he went to work and appointed members. I think he's taking it seriously just like we are. I hope so.
And have you got any cooperation from the federal government? Are they going to come and present?
I've had conversations with Senator Klobuchar's office, Senator Smith's office. I do think that there are members of Congress who are going to want to help us out, but there are a lot of unanswered questions, and that's true at the federal level, that's here at the state level. So we're going to need some help from our Republican colleagues as well, and I hope they'll join us.
Is 2026 soon enough to respond? I see 153 million already gone in the federal funding tracker. Soybean farmers right now have nowhere to send their crops. Is 2026 soon enough to respond, or should you have a special session to do
It is
this?
astonishing to me how much has already happened in the first, 8 months of the Trump administration and the impacts that we're already feeling. We have been aware of what was coming, because some of the things were happening while we were in session. But I think we also have to get ready. And one of the things that's been most difficult about this is getting really good information across the board. So we want to make sure that we are turning what is a very murky situation that is got harmful impacts for the people of Minnesota and the state's budget and our economy. We want to make more clear what we're experiencing, so we can prepare not just for the 26th session, but for the years ahead.
No, we'll likely hear more. Sorry.
I'll just add that this subcommittee is starting September 18th. We'll have our first hearing September 18th because 2026 is far away still at this moment. And there are changes coming seemingly every day from the Trump administration. So we don't feel like we can wait until February to start trying to figure out what these impacts really look like, how Minnesotans are dealing with them. The SNAP changes are already in effect. Our farmers have been affected by China no longer buying soybeans. It's been a huge impact on Minnesota. In October, the new premiums, healthcare premiums, will come out, and we're expecting large increases there. We don't feel like Minnesotans can wait. They're already feeling the impacts, so that's why we're getting started right now.
So is there any teeth to this, or is it just a bunch of informational meetings? I mean, what can you do that is proactive out of these meetings?
I absolutely believe that this is important work to prepare for the session. I also think our standing committees are going to be taking up a number of these issues as well in order to prepare legislation going forward. It's a sweeping change to our state and federal government relationship. It is a sweeping change in terms of the partnership that we've experienced with the federal government for years in supporting health care for people, food support for people, jobs for people. So yes, I think it's important that we act, but we have to understand on what we're going to act. So we're getting to work now because we can't wait. And we will bring to bear what we learn from Minnesotans across the state through the legislative process.
Have you had any conversations with colleagues from different states that are doing similar subcommittees?
I have spent time talking with leaders in other states, yes, I have indeed.
Tip your hand, what are some of those other states?
Well, a number of them.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
How frequently we all meet?
So the plan is to have a committee hearing here at the Capitol every other week, and then to be out across the state on the weeks in between. So every week we'll be doing something, whether that's meeting with farmers or teachers or a hospital that's at risk of closing, or having hearings here in St. Paul.
Besides time, do you anticipate this committee will cost any money or extra resources? I mean, you're talking about doing visits across the state. How are you gonna, pay for that?
This is a subcommittee of the Rules Committee, and I am the chair of that committee and have a small budget which will allow us to do this work. It's really important that we are connecting with Minnesotans in Minnesota across the state, not just here at the Capitol.
Will this committee be active during a possible upcoming special session on guns?
To be determined.
Is there anything that changes the timeline here? Is there anything that forces you to ask for a special session? Say Ellison loses one of the 40 or whatever lawsuits against the Trump administration, or some major decision that really has an immediate impact. Is there anything you're seeing that could change your timeline?
So there are a lot of things that have already happened that I'm very concerned about. And so I suppose there's always that possibility. But even at the end of the last session and the special session, when we were talking about this legislation and what it meant for us, and talking about whether or not we would have a special session, it became clear to me, and as I've been across the state, people keep asking this question. They don't like this law. They know that it has ongoing problems for communities across the state, for families. They get that, but they don't really understand. Neither do we, not fully, not enough. So rather than answer the question about would we, I think we need to dig in and understand and get to work on what we see coming at us so we can make that decision in an informed way. And I know legislating is a slow and tedious process. It's meant to be that way. But I think we should take this work very seriously. This isn't about a political quick fix. It really is about understanding what we're going to experience over the next decade and what we can do to prepare and to support Minnesotans through it.
On a special session on guns, have you done a vote count for any of the sort of big ticket things that the governor's talking about? Assault weapon ban, high capacity magazine ban?
So I know that we're going to meet with the governor this afternoon, all four leaders, to talk a little bit more about the trajectory of that, and we'll probably talk with you when we're done with that.
Is that the first meeting you guys are having on that?
We have not had a meeting with all the leaders, and in fact, the House just elected a leader last night. Congratulations to Zach Stevenson, the new House Leader.
Any comment on Representative Stevenson being a new voice in those meetings? I guess he's been there in the past, but now the face of the House DFL.
You know, I think it is, you know, it's such a tender moment for all of us who have worked with Speaker Hortman. And I can only imagine the hours of caucus deliberation that they had last night in electing somebody. And I want them so very, very much to succeed. And I think Zach Stevenson's going to do a great job in bringing them through. He was great to work with during the session.
Will this committee hear from people who actually like the Trump bill, like things that it's doing?
Absolutely. I mean, we are very open to that. We want to know the full impacts, and we know that there are some things in this bill that people like. There is, you know, questions about taxing tips or not taxing tips, things like that people might like. We want to fully understand what the impact is, and we can only do that if we're willing to talk to everybody, which is why I am committed to making sure we are traveling the state, that we are listening to people who are impacted by this, because I think one of the biggest frustrations that I have with the reconciliation bill is that it seems to have taken into no account the impact on states. And we don't want to make our decisions moving forward without having those conversations with counties, with cities, with school boards, with Minnesotans. Our decisions here at the legislature impact all of them, and we want to make sure that we're doing that in partnership.
Sort of in relation to that question, are either of you worried that this committee could be used for, say, punditry, I guess, by either your side of the aisle or a future Republican majority who may want to undermine a Democratic president, something like that?
You know, I can't speak to the future, but what we see the Republicans in Washington have done with the Trump administration is pass into law a sweeping piece of legislation that takes money that is going into people's health care and food support and jobs and giving it to the wealthiest Americans in the form of a tax cut and leaving the states to pick up the pieces. We need to understand what that means for Minnesotans, for families, for our healthcare system, for farmers across the state of Minnesota, for our economy, and do our jobs. And if someone wants to make that about punditry, that's their choice. But it's a serious shift on the part of the federal government, and we have to take that seriously here at home.
Any other questions on the select committee?
Will you take public testimony during the hearings?
Yes.
Yep, absolutely, and we'll have virtual options so we can hear from people around the state who can't come in and you know, testify here at St. Paul. But we will absolutely be, you know, just like any other committee hearing, having opportunity for public testimony.
So September 18th was the first hearing, and then the next week you were on the road. Do you know where?
We're working out the details, but we're looking at addressing food security in that first week of site visits and then the next hearing.
We'll get you information as it becomes available.
Thank you.
All right, thank you,
very
everyone.
much.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you all.